Chapter 5, Connecting with the Human Spirit. We do not believe in ourselves until someone reveals that deep inside us something is valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch. Once we believe in ourselves, we can risk curiosity, wonder, spontaneous delight, or any experience that reveals the human spirit. That's from a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Jean slid under the hedge, cramming herself as far under the spiky branches as she could go. Lying on her back, she grabbed fistfuls of leaves and piled them over her legs. Then she dropped a last handful over her face. The moist leaves molded to her cheeks, her chin, and her eyelids. It wasn't easy for Marianne to find her. "Jean, why did you disappear on us?" she asked, kneeling down and gently brushing the leaves away. "Police dogs were chasing me," Jean said. "The men with black masks were telling them to catch me. How dare they? How dare they come after me like this?" Just after breakfast that morning, Jean had noticed several other Silverado residents walking with two of the community dogs. It sparked a hallucination, and Jean fled out of the nearest store, frantic to hide from her imagined pursuers. Jean had memory impairment. For several years, her family doctor had waved off Jean's increasing lapses of recollection as just old age, until her condition was revealed in a startlingly public way. The day before attending a political convention, 80-year-old Jean made it known she planned to make her entrance in a white winter suit, dressy white hat, and designer jewelry, in keeping with her customary regal style. But rather than arrive with steady panache, she burst into the meeting hall dressed in sweatpants and slippers, cradled a stuffed green frog in a Santa hat. Dashing over to a group of acquaintances, she exclaimed she was having car trouble. When they ran outside, they found her vehicle in the middle of the parking lot, engine running, all four doors open, and jewelry strewn across the back seat. Convention organizers summoned an ambulance. In the emergency room, physicians diagnosed front lobe dementia. Less prevalent than Alzheimer's disease, the condition can involve hallucinations, often accompanied by anger and aggression. When Jean left the hospital, she moved into Silverado. Several days after she arrived, Jean grabbed a cane and smashed the Christmas tree in the lobby. Not having successfully made her point, she hurled a cup of coffee, saucer included, at a caregiver, who stopped to chat with her. If Jean had been living almost any place other than Silverado, she would have quickly received a slew of tranquilizing medications. But at Silverado, her outbursts were not viewed as senseless symptoms of memory impairment, but rather as part of the complicated personality. "We don't drug our residents to silence them," said Lawrence Shuck. We listen to them and observe what their bodies are expressing through gestures. By understanding how to connect with their spirit, we're able to provide this best care for them. Who was Jean before she came to Silverado? She was a businesswoman, an owner of commercial buildings, the holder of a real estate license. Starting in her teens and throughout her life, Jean participated in a dizzying array of community groups, invariably ascending to their presidencies. These groups included a historical society, a town bicentennial committee, and various business professional groups for women. As a child, she licked stamps and stuffed envelopes for presidential candidate Wendell Wickey. Her passion for Republican politics was so fervent that she twice served as a delegate to the GOP presidential nomination convention. Following political news incessantly, she kept her television tuned to talk shows 24 hours a day. Jean owns 100 pairs of shoes and had collected 600 hats. She married 5 times. Those closest to her are quick to say she was never an easy person. to describe her as authoritative and controlling. A few days after Jean's dash into Silverado's garden, Marianne, who is the resident engagement director at Jean's community, stopped by her room. She noticed that the shade on the lamp by Jean's bed was covered with jagged, dark pink stripes and the hue and consistency of lipstick. Jean, Marianne asked, "Did you do this?" Jean nodded. "Look in the closet." Marianne opened the closet door. Inside, angry words had been scrawled on the walls in the same pink. To say the least, Jean's spirit was expressing itself, Marianne said a year later. She had always been so independent, so strong. Now she was angry because she had lost her authority and control. To provide the care that would be best for her, we need to give the authority and control back to her. The way to do that was to involve Jean in more than the Silverado engagements themselves. We started by asking her to observe the classes and clubs we have for residents and to tell us if she thought there were ways that they could be improved. I told her we needed someone with her experience. Little by little, Jean became intrigued. As Jean began to assist, Marianne assigned her a desk in the engagement department and provided her with a name badge identical to those worn by the community staff. These days, Jean interviews of potential employees for the engagement department. In addition, she creates binders of photos and information for suggested activities. She also runs the community's flower arranging club. Not every class runs smoothly, Marianne admits, but many of them do. As Jean's involvement with the program increased, her outbursts disappeared. Despite her memory impairment, a year after coming to Silverado, Jean is able to reflect on her transition. I rebelled because I felt my way of life was being taken away from me, and that I was being held against my will. Running the classes gives me a sense of fulfillment. I can do something and be appreciated by others. Jean no longer collects hats or shoes. She never watches the television in her room, and she recently asked that it be taken out. She doesn't have time for it. Working with flowers is more important to me now. When you look at a beautiful arrangement, you can't help but feel satisfied that you created it. Her transformation has surprised and gratified her daughters, Terry and Linda. She has so much pleasure with the flower arrangement, Terry said. Maybe she's revisiting a part of her early identity before she became wrapped up in so many activities and politics. Linda added, "For our mother, memory impairment hasn't meant the end of an active life. It's more like a new stage of life, one that has been tremendously satisfying. Connecting with the spirit of someone with memory impairment is not a one-size-fits-all practice. It takes time. It can be discouraging and frustrating in the meanwhile." With Jean, caregivers listened to what she had to say and were able to draw her out, and they learned and interpreted her life story. For Henry, the connection happened one morning as he watched a workman outside his window. When he had first come to Silverado, he barely spoke. Every time he was invited to join an engagement, he avoided eye contact, refusing to leave the chair by his bed. When staff brought breakfast on a tray, he turned away. Later, they would find it almost untouched. One day, several Silverado residents and staff moved a small barn into the community's courtyard and began painting it. They were preparing an event with a Western theme. After days of apathy, Henry was suddenly interested. He came outside, sat down, crossed one leg over another, and watched the activity for several hours, his face alert with an appraising expression. Why did Henry's spirit come to life? Silverado staff and members knew Henry had supervised his own company for many years. They thought he might respond to the bustle of a work site, so when the barn needed to be painted, they made sure Henry would see the activity. For the next few days, we asked him if he would take his breakfast in the courtyard and keep an eye on what was going on, explained Carol, administrator of the community where he resides. The change in Henry from that day was enormous. David is a chaplain with Silverado Hospice. Understanding how to connect with the spirit of the memory impaired wasn't obvious for him at the outset. Often, his very first meeting with the residents occurs when they can no longer open their eyes or speak. He remarks it's one thing to provide nursing care to the memory impaired at the end of life, but what does it mean to be a chaplain when a person no longer appears to be responsive? Being a chaplain involves communication. Through his training and his experience at Silverado, David now maintains people in a remote state, whether a coma or deep dementia, are still people, and we can reach them. He often starts by matching his breathing to the patient's pace. After establishing a bond through his shared cadence, he adds the words, "I can feel the rhythm of your breath. I can see that your eyes are moving under your eyelids. If it's all right with you, I would like to hold your hand for a while." Time and again, David has seen how presence, focus, and touch spark a spiritual connection, which expresses itself through small but compelling signs. One example was contact with a man in the last stages of Parkinson's. As I held his hand, it had strong tremors from his disease. I began to talk to him about the transition from this life to the next. After a while, despite the tremors, I could feel that he was squeezing my hand. It was a powerful moment. Touching the spirit of the memory impaired at life's end has enriched me tremendously and given me a better understanding of myself. And David says, the inevitable downward progression of memory impairment is like a thief slipping into our lives and robbing us of the person we were and the people we knew. How is it possible that diseases affecting memory can change us in a positive way? I don't think people understand how nourishing it is to our minds and to our emotions to connect with another human spirit. Carol, the community administrator, said, "This connection is something we fundamentally need as human beings, but we're losing it in modern life. When I can focus on another person, when it's just the two of us communicating, regardless of whether we use words, it feeds every piece of my soul." She added she is thankful every day the Silverado's residents allow her to have this connection with them. They do so much for me than I could do for them. Carol's work with the memory impaired has spanned 2 decades. She holds what many consider a renegade view, that this disease, while heartbreaking, can also be liberating. Released from the inhibition of social connections, many Silverado residents are try engaging in activities they never have considered before. A man who rarely stepped into the kitchen at home joins residents' cooking club. A woman builds a birdhouse, even though she used to think of herself as all thumbs. Add to that the resident who was always told she was tone deaf, and is now part of the community chorus. At Silverado, her spirit has the freedom to sing its song. So that was chapter 5, connecting with the human spirit.